Well, I always like to do before and after videos where I kind of just take an image, start it from scratch, zero out all the settings, and show you what I would do from scratch. Okay, and that's exactly what we'll do in this one. We'll use a portrait. This is a portrait I took outside, so natural light portrait. And we'll start from scratch. We'll go through the whole process. I'm going to do this in Camera Raw. Just understand, everything I'm doing in Camera Raw here would work exactly the same if I was using Lightroom. The develop module in Lightroom is exactly the same as everything over here in Camera Raw. All right, so first thing I would do, exposure. We got to get the exposure down a little bit. So I'll bring the exposure down. I want to warm the photo, so I'm going to bring my temperature slider over to the right. You can see that's just before and after. Okay, now come down here, highlights and shadows. You can see if I move the highlights, see how it's kind of toning down the edge of their hair a little bit, and I want to do that here. It's a little bit. I like the edge light. It's just a little bit hot, so we'll take that down a little bit. Shadows will open up the shadows. We really don't have any shadow detail in this image to open up, so we don't have to worry too much about that. Whites and blacks. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I kind of have a formula here. Hold down the Option key on Mac, Alt key on PC. Click on the white slider. Everything turns black. Drag it to the right. When you start to see little specks of detail, that means you have a white point. Okay. Do the same thing on the black. Everything turns white. When you start to drag it to the left, now you have a black point. Okay. What does that do? It just gives you an overall good amount of contrast. Okay. Just gives a little bit of punch, a little bit of contrast to the photo. It's like using levels inside of Photoshop. If you ever hear anybody say a photo looks washed out, that's kind of what they're talking about. It just lacks that contrast. All right, let's see here. Clarity. Clarity would work great on a landscape photo with lots of detail. Clarity is going to work really bad on this photo. Okay, so I'm not going to use clarity here. I'll sharpen it later on. Vibrance does a good job of punching up some of the color there. It kind of makes the colors a little bit more vibrant without affecting too much of their skin tone. So that's a good thing. And saturation would be the sunburn slider. We want to keep that down at 0 in this case. And things are looking pretty good here. I would probably come over... if I were just going to use Camera Raw, I'd come over here to the post-crop vignetting under the effects panel, and I'd add a vignette. Okay, and you can see it makes a huge difference, right, before and after. So if I were just going to use Camera Raw, that's what I would do. In this case here, though, I know that I'm going to go into Photoshop because I have a couple things that I want to do. So I'm going to show you a little Photoshop trick that we can use later on to go in here and to add a little vignette around the edges there. But let's just take a look. Before, after. Okay, so that's what we've done so far inside of Camera Raw. So let's click on Open Image. This is going to take us into Photoshop. And what do we want to do in Photoshop? Well, I do the Photoshop-like things. We'll zoom in on the photo. First thing I always do, I grab my spot healing brush. Content aware turned on, and I just get rid of little blemishes, little spots and blemishes. Now, I know that these are just freckles on her arm here, but I'm going to go and get rid of some of the bigger ones because what happens is sometimes when people are looking at a photo and they see something like that, they're not sure if it's a freckle or not, and it just looks like a spot. All right, and I do it a lot of so I'm not trying to make the skin perfect. It's not that. It's just that you don't want people to mistake that for maybe an ant crawling on her arm, or, you know, I see a lot of time with a sky, there's a bird in the sky, or maybe the moon in a really wide angle photo. The problem is if that bird is not the focus or that moon is not the focus, sometimes it just looks like a spot and it's a distraction. So that's why we're going to get rid of it. Not because we're trying to make skin perfect, because we're trying to just remove distraction. So get rid of a couple of those little spots there. One little one right up here. I think that's looking pretty good. All right, a couple over here that could probably benefit to go. All right, next thing I would do, make myself a brand new layer, blank layer, press S to get my clone stamp tool, change the blend mode to lighten and the opacity to about 20%. All right, and what this is going to do, I want to just kind of brighten that and kind of get rid of a little bit of the what's under her eyes here. Okay, so we're going to get a brush that's about that size. Option or Alt click right underneath, click to sample, and then just brush. Just brush a couple of times right there. Okay, same thing over here. Option or Alt click, sample, and brush a couple of times. Now, does it look like too much? That's before, that's after. Absolutely. Definitely looks like too much, but that's why we do it on a separate layer, because now I come over here to the opacity and I kind of just blend the two in. Okay. Maybe just halfway, 50%, just to reduce it. We don't need it to be gone, just to reduce it a little bit. Okay. So that takes care of that. Let's see here. The one other big problem, I see two problems. I see two things I'd like to get rid of here. So one thing would be this little line right on the edge of her chin here. Let's make another new layer. Take our clone stamp tool. We'll Option or Alt click. And I'm just going to paint. Okay. And see how it just smooths that out a little bit? Before, after. So we can just take care of that. And again, reduce your opacity if you have to. And then the next thing I'm going to do is her face. Her face is a little bit darker. It's slightly in the shadow. You can tell the sun was probably coming from over here. It's lit her face a little bit more. Maybe she's got a little bit more of a tan. And there's a little bit of redness to her face here. So what we can do is we can go to our hue saturation adjustment. I use this all the time on portraits. Go to reds, reduce the saturation. Now, I don't know how much at this point. I'm going to do it so it's obvious. Okay. And then come back over here. Since we have the layer mask, I'm just going to flip the layer mask from black to white. So Command or Control I. See how the layer mask was white? Okay. Command I on the Mac, Control I on the PC. It puts it to black. It basically hides all of that redness that we just reduced here. And then I just paint on the layer mask with the opposite color. So it's black right now. So I take a white brush tool and I just paint on the layer mask. And see what I'm doing here? Okay, see how it starts to reduce all the color? So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. Now, it's creepy. I understand it's creepy. That's where we come over here. We double click on the adjustment layer, go back over here to reds, and bring the saturation back up. Okay, I'm not going to bring it all the way up. I'm going to reduce it just a little bit. Okay. Again, this one should be pretty subtle. It's not like her skin was horribly red, but there's just a little tint of red there. And I might even reduce the opacity of that just a little bit. Okay. And then finally, while I'm here, I'll probably come back in here and maybe increase the lightness just a little bit. So all I'm trying to do is just kind of match her face with her face, just a little bit more than it was before. Okay. And again, if it's too much, just reduce your opacity, and it kind of mixes between the two. All right, we'll finish this up with a couple of things. Let's do some sharpening. We'll press Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E. And it's Control, Alt, Shift, E on a PC. That merges everything into one new composite layer here. It's one brand new layer, but the layer still exists below. So I flattened everything up to a new layer, but I still have these below in case I need them. And we'll go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. And I always just zoom in on the eyes here. That's really what I'm concerned with. So I'm going to just crank this up here. Looks good. All right. So we got our sharpening done. And that's really the main part that I'm concerned about. A little kind of side note for you. If you ever start to introduce texture into the skin from sharpening, just add a layer mask. Go to your brush tool. What color is the layer mask? It's white. You just switch to the opposite color. So switch your foreground color to black and just paint on that layer mask. And you can paint it away from the skin. So it still keeps it on the eyes, but it just keeps it away from the skin so you don't start to introduce any texture onto the skin here. And then the last thing that we do here is Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E one more time. Merges everything to a new layer. We take our rectangular marquee tool. And we're going to add that vignette. I told you we could do it inside of Camera Raw and Lightroom, and we can. I just prefer this one a little bit more. I just kind of like this effect a little bit more. So when I can do it here, I do. So we make a rectangular marquee. We go to Select, Modify, Feather. Hit it with a very large feather amount, about 250 pixels. All right. Select Inverse, and then press Command J on the Mac, Control J on the PC. That's what we have. Okay, if I hide all the other layers, we're left with this kind of edge transparency thing. And then I just change the layer blend mode to multiply. Reduce the opacity a little bit. But to me, I like when I can do a vignette that way. That's why I like to come into Photoshop. If I'm here already doing retouching and things like that, I like to add my vignette. It's kind of because it uses the photo itself to burn in the edges around everything rather than us just adding black or anything on top of the edges of the photo. I just kind of like it this way. So just personal preference. I find I get better results when I do it here, and I figure I'm already in Photoshop. So if you are going to be in Photoshop, you might as well use that little trick. Okay, folks, let's go ahead and let's do this. Let me go to open, and let me just open this image up inside of Camera Raw. I'm going to reset Camera Raw defaults. Let's bring the exposure down because I think it was a little overexposed. So we'll just bring it down a little. Reset, copy, paste. So now we can see. Okay, now we can see our before and after. Before, after. Before, after. I can even go full screen with it here. Okay. And we'll do, that's before, that's after. Once again, let me make it a little bit bigger for you. There we go. Before, after. So you guys get hopefully get the idea that we start in Camera Raw. We do our color and our exposure adjustments and all the big stuff inside of Camera Raw. And then I use Photoshop to do retouching, remove any things that we have to. This selective color thing where we wanted to remove the red. And heck, if I could go back and redo anything in this one, we could come back over here. I could zoom in. I would probably zoom in right on the edge here and take my clone stamp tool. Let's get my layer palette back into play. I would take my clone stamp tool, Option or Alt click, and probably come in here, change it from light and back to normal, get the opacity. But I would probably come in here and maybe see if I can, just get down the edge of that piece of hair over there. We can even do it on a separate layer. Just get down the edge of that piece of hair over there so it doesn't kind of stick out. I know I did a hack job here, but oh gosh, it's getting horrible here. Let's undo a couple of times because I embarked on this. I guess I should go ahead and finish it. So I'll take my clone stamp tool, Option or Alt click. There we go. And just go in there and just get rid of that little piece of hair. And you can use the clone stamp to kind of smooth it out. But any little flyaways that you see around the edges there, that's a good idea as well. Okay, folks, thanks for watching. My name is Matt Kloskowski, and I will talk to you again very soon.